These, watching frogs spawn, turn into tadpoles in a jam jar on the classroom windowsill, or just feeding the ducks in the park. For many of us, they're the start of a love affair with the nature of Britain.
And there's plenty to fall in love with. You'll be amazed at the spectacular wild sights that Britain has to offer. Most of us only ever scratch the surface of our rich heritage and see just a fraction of the natural wonders we can call our own. In this series, I'll be travelling to every corner of our islands in search of the very best of British wildlife. To celebrate the remarkable animals and plants with which we share our home. All of these living things have their own incredible stories to tell that reveal an intricate web of extraordinary relationships between animals and plants, the landscapes they live in, and our lives too. Over the coming weeks, I'll be exploring and uncovering these relationships to piece together the jigsaw that makes up the nature of Britain.
But for all our natural wonders, the truth of the matter is that we don't have the tallest mountains in the world, or the hottest deserts, or the deepest seas. And yet we all feel that there's something special, something uniquely, well, British about our countryside. So the first question to answer is it more than just a feeling? Or is there something truly special about our countryside and our wildlife? Let's find out.
And to begin the search for what might make our island home special, I'm heading to the far north. These are the remote Shetland Islands, closer to the Arctic Circle than they are to London, and I'm about to risk life and limb for my first clue.
The creature I've come to see is known locally as a Scooty Allen. It's no relation. It's got a fearsome reputation. So I'm walking slowly and rather tentatively. Oh! Oh! Oh!
These angry aerial acrobats are skuas, and I'm trespassing on their patch. Dive bombing's their way of letting any intruders know they're not welcome. And it certainly does the trick.
See why they call them skewers? One false move and you're skewered. They're big birds, aren't they? Talk about your life in their hands. They come at you from all angles.
Ah, charming. And what are these skewers defending? Well, that's what I've come here to see.
It's a chick, about a week old, and it's very precious. Not just to its parents, but also to us, because this is one of just a handful of breeding sites in the British Isles. It's not just any old skewer, it's an Arctic skewer, whose breeding grounds are mainly on the Arctic tundra, and this is the very southernmost point of its breeding range.
It's hard to imagine that this harmless ball of fluff will grow up to be such an intimidating adult. It's certainly got some toughening up to do. Most Arctic skewers nest much nearer the Arctic Circle, in places like Iceland, but in the far north of Scotland, it's just close enough to allow them to breed.
Only because our long, thin chain of islands stretches so far north are we lucky enough to have this bird and other Arctic species breeding here. It's a good example of our geography and our position on the world map influencing our wildlife. But I think for now, I'd better give its parents a bit of peace and get out of here.
It's time to head from one extreme to the other. To the hot sun and warm sand of our most southerly outposts. Because what makes us really special is we've also got our very own miniature Mediterranean, complete with some exotic-looking wildlife. Egrets, for example. And who'd have thought these vibrant green lizards lived in Britain? There's even a Mediterranean creature you might see in your own back garden. The hummingbird hawk moth is a regular visitor to the south, and in a warm year can be found as far north as Scotland. If you're lucky enough to catch sight of one, it's worth stopping a while to appreciate quite what a remarkable creature this is. Slowed down 40 times, its precision flying abilities become clear as it sips nectar from each individual floret. The muscles that power these aerial manoeuvres can only operate in a warm climate, so Britain is about as far north as it can breed.
So the British Isles sit across a boundary. We have one foot in the cold Arctic north and the other foot in a warmer, more Mediterranean south, giving us a special mix of wildlife. And the importance of our position in shaping the big list of British plants and animals doesn't end there.
Our prime location, sitting at the edge of Europe and looking out at the rest of the world, has made Britain a global crossroads for human explorers, traders and invaders for thousands of years. And they've brought with them their own contributions to the animals and plants that you can find in modern-day Britain. Pheasants. They were brought over by the Normans, 1066 and all that. Fallow deer came with the Normans too. Grey squirrels were brought from America in 1876. And no one's quite sure who let the parakeets out, though they made themselves quite at home. But I'm here to see an animal brought to Britain by the Romans. A bright spring morning near Cambridge, and the inhabitants of this field are beginning to gather. For brown hares, there's love in the air. But the girls are playing hard to get. This female uses fisticuffs to let the male know his attentions are not welcome. Or perhaps to test that he's strong and healthy enough to be a worthy mate. For us, catching sight of the mad March hares on a cold, crisp morning is something to gladden the heart. a magic, natural moment to treasure forever. It seems that this time, the male's persistence has paid off. The animals and plants brought here by people passing through our shores all help make up our unique mixture of wildlife, found nowhere else in the world, and which owes a great deal to where we sit on the global map. And there's one final way in which our position helps give the British countryside its unique character. A British woodland in winter. It seems lifeless, barren. Very little stirs.
But it's all about to change. Because of our position on the globe, this woodland and the entire British countryside is about to undergo a dramatic transformation, all driven by the power of the sun.
Because Britain sits well above the equator, the amount of sun we get varies enormously through the year. Winter days are short, and the sun sits low in the sky, weakening the power of its rays. But as the sun rises higher, more and more life-giving energy is beamed onto Britain. The moment of change is approaching. And when I say change, I mean change. In one of the most dramatic transformations on the planet, the dead, dark woodland becomes a lush, green wonderland. As the forest is reborn, its animal inhabitants also spring back to life. Flowers burst open to greet the sun that fuels their growth. Their vibrant beauty, a celebration of the life which has so quickly returned. It's a floral extravaganza to match any on Earth. And it's right here, on our doorstep. The seasons dictate the calendar of natural events that give our countryside so much of its character. And for me, there's nowhere else in the world that can quite match the glories of a British spring.
So, Britain's position on the face of the earth definitely helps to make us special. It gives us our distinctive seasons, and it defines our uniquely British mix of wildlife. It's clear that where we are influences what we are.
For the next clue as to what makes Britain special, it's time to head back up north. This time to a very particular beach, not far from Inverness, which is home to a quite remarkable coastal performance. Every day throughout the summer, crowds of people gather here in the hope of witnessing something rather wonderful. Scanning the ocean, they hope to catch a glimpse of movement, which might be the first sign of a sight that few would expect in Britain. Our coast is home to some of the largest bottlenose dolphins in the world, twice as long as a grown man and 8 times the weight. And this is one of the few places on Earth where you can reliably see them quite so close to dry land. And having quite so much fun. They've come here to catch salmon, which are heading back into the rivers to spawn. But they're not above playing with their food first. And maybe it's just me, but the dolphins seem to enjoy their fishing at least as much as we enjoy watching it.
And to really see how rich our coastal waters are, I need to take a look beneath the waves. This is the first dive I've ever made. Oh, I can tell you, it's a whole new world down here. I'm quite used to the feeling of breathing underwater. There are things here I've never seen before. Oh look, I think that's a pipefish. He's a relative of the seahorse. I never thought they got this big.
It's pretty murky down here, but that's actually a good sign. It's countless millions of microscopic plankton that are clouding the water. And they're thriving thanks to the plentiful nutrients in our seas.
The tentacles of this snake-lox anemone are catching the plankton as they drift past. Seeing it like this, it looks like some sort of alien. There's nothing like this up there on land.
I can only explore the very fringes of this underwater world, but head out into deeper water and the sea is full of surprises.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me, my lover stands on golden sands and watches the ships that go sailing.
This kaleidoscope of marine life is only here because Britain's coastal waters are so rich in nutrients. In fact, our seas are among the most productive anywhere on Earth. And if you want final proof of just how productive they are, then there's no better place to find it than here. The remote Monarch Isles off the west coast of Scotland. Home to another British speciality. Our coastal waters support more grey seals than anywhere else in the world, and this is the largest breeding colony in Britain. All fed by our rich and productive seas. The mothers convert their diet of fish into an incredibly nutritious milk to fuel the growth of their young pups. And the youngsters need it. In just 18 days, they have to build up the strength to face the cold Atlantic waters alone. The pups put on over 1.5 kilos each day, and more than double their weight during their brief time on land. But in between all that feeding, there's still enough time for a bit of playful mucking about. Peace doesn't reign on the monarchs for long, though. Soon after the females give birth, they're ready to mate. Rival males eye each other up, all looking for a chance to take over a prime piece of beach full of willing females. Snarls and posturing will see off lesser rivals. But sometimes there's no alternative but to fight. Battles break out all along the beach. These 2-ton leviathans don't hold back. Fights are vicious, bloody, and sometimes fatal. This is nature in the raw. It's a desperate battle for the all-important chance to father the next generation.
Our rich coastal waters are a great and undervalued national treasure. But the sea isn't just important because of the wildlife that lives in it, on it and around it. It also has a more dramatic role to play in our story. And that's because it has an enormously powerful influence on our weather.
Love it or loathe it, Britain just wouldn't be the same without rain. Whether it's April showers, sudden summer downpours at Wimbledon, cold autumn drizzle, or freezing sleet in winter, sometimes it seems as though it never stops raining in Britain. In fact, we do get far more rain than most of continental Europe. And that's because so much of our weather sweeps in across the sea that surrounds us. It picks up moisture from the Atlantic Ocean on the way, creating rain-laden clouds that then drop most of their contents on us. But far from complaining about the rain, we should take pride in it, because it too goes a long way towards making Britain special. As any gardener knows, plants like nothing more than a good soak. And all this rain creates a lush carpet that makes our land so green and pleasant. Rain feeds rushing streams and rivers, and the power of these waterways has carved away at Britain's bedrock for thousands of years to create some of our most dramatic countryside. Rain has shaped the landscapes which have inspired so many of our great artists and writers. After all, where would the Lake District be without a regular refilling from the heavens? One way or another, all that rain, which we spend so much time talking about, plays a huge part in making Britain such a special place. And our plentiful supply of rain also has some rather surprising effects on our wildlife. Take badgers, for example. British badgers are special, much friendlier than their relatives on the European mainland. I've come to a badger set in southwest England to see it for myself and to find out why. And I've put out a few peanuts to give them something to nibble on, and hopefully to give us a better view.
Wonderful to see them so close. But they're so intent on what they're doing. If I keep my voice down, they won't even notice. Can you hear them chomping away? That's quite a goodly number here on one patch of ground. And that's why they're different from European badgers. On the continent, they tend to be much more solitary in ones and twos. Here, they're in much larger groups. And believe it or not, it's all because of our weather that our badgers are so much more sociable than their continental cousins.
To find out exactly what's going on, we need to follow the badgers out of the forest to where they find their food. And that's going to need some pretty serious technology.
This is an amazing bit of kit. It's a full military specification image intensifying camera. It doesn't use infrared. Instead, it has the capacity to multiply the available moonlight to between 12 and 15,000 times.
And that means that it can reveal a mysterious nighttime world that most of us never see. a fox, and a couple of roe deer. And that looks like a hungry badger to me. He'll be using his sense of smell to sniff out a meal from the moist soil, because moist soil means worms, and there are lots of worms here. Worms make great badger food, plentiful, packed full of protein, and easy to dig up from the damp earth. On mainland Europe, where it's generally a bit drier and food can be harder to find, a single badger needs a much bigger territory. Our mild, damp and drizzly climate, on the other hand, is perfect for worms, so there's a lot more food easily available, and badgers can live more sociable lives in much larger groups.
So there we are. Because we're surrounded by sea, that means we get lots of rain. Lots of rain means lots of worms, and that means we can sustain large groups of badgers. Sorted.
But there's one more way in which the sea adds something special to Britain. Christmas Day on Brighton Beach. And in the great spirit of British eccentricity, dozens of people take part in a seasonal splash.
Having fun, it's the season, love and understanding. Merry Christmas.
You wouldn't catch me in there. But it's not quite as cold as it looks, and for two very good reasons. The temperature of our sea is raised by warmer water brought to Britain from the tropics on the currents of the Gulf Stream. And during summer, the shallow sea soaks up the warmth of the sun, releasing it slowly through the winter. So the sea can actually be warmer in December than it is on May Day. And that's important to more than just the Brighton swimmers. Even when we do get a white Christmas, the warmth from the sea keeps Britain from getting too cold. It boosts the temperatures across the whole of the British Isles, only by a couple of degrees, but enough to give us milder winters than much of continental Europe. And that attracts millions of wild visitors to Britain each year. Believe it or not, many of the apparently familiar birds visiting your back garden in winter are actually foreigners. Our winters may seem bitter, but compared to where some of these birds have come from, it's positively balmy. And that's all thanks to the warming effects of the sea. And there's one of these winter visitors that arrives in such numbers that it creates what's arguably the most mesmerising natural spectacle in Britain. You catch a glimpse of a single bird, perhaps a small flock of 3 or 4. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the flocks build, and as birds fly in from all directions, the groups merge and grow in number. And then, quite suddenly, it seems as if the sky is full of starlings. But this is only the beginning. Numbers can be truly staggering, with up to 7 million birds in a single flock. a swarm of biblical proportions. All waiting for someone to be the first to fly down into the reed bed below. Sometimes the whole flock drops down quickly into the reeds, but sometimes they perform an extraordinary aerial dance that leaves you breathless. It's like a living sculpture in the sky. A perfectly choreographed natural ballet. And then, all at once, the birds begin to plummet into the reeds, and the magic moment is over. The silence of the aerial dance is replaced by the noisy chatter of the roosting birds as the day draws to an end.
So far, we've gone a long way to discovering what makes the British Isles such a special place. We've seen how our position on the planet influences the animals and plants that live here and gives us our distinctive seasons. How the incredible productivity of our coastal waters makes them among the richest in the world, and how the sea that surrounds us gives us our unique British weather and shapes our countryside and our wildlife. But there are two important bits of the puzzle missing, and I've come here to the island of Alderney to find one of them.
Alderney, one of the smallest of the Channel Islands, is the perfect place to see how being stuck on an island can make you, well, special. There's an animal found here which has changed, developed, evolved to become a ghost-like mutation of its mainland relatives.
And here it is, a blonde hedgehog. It's blonde because of a genetic quirk that means there's no pigment in its spines. A bit like blondness in humans, but much, much rarer. Hedgehogs like this are 1 in a million on the mainland, but here on Alderney there are hundreds of them. And all because they're stuck on an island.
Let me explain. Hedgehogs were introduced to Alderney, and the original animals just happened to have that blonde genetic quirk. And with such a small population on this isolated island, inbreeding has helped blonde hedgehogs become more and more common.
The residents of Alderney have really taken these blonde hedgehogs to their hearts. For a start, they get fed most evenings, and they have other benefits over normal hedgehogs. For one thing, nobody seems to know why, but they don't get fleas. And when it comes to road safety, they have a distinct advantage. It's always been easier to spot a blonde in your headlights.
Alderney isn't the only island to have its own unique race of a familiar animal. In fact, we've got lots of island specialities. The Skomer vole, the St Kilda wren, even a Lundy cabbage, found nowhere else in the world. All because Britain is an island of islands. More than 6,000 of them in all, from Muckle Flugger to the Isle of Thanet. Our island character is essential in giving us some of our most memorable natural treasures. And top of the list are some of the largest, noisiest and most spectacular seabird colonies found anywhere in the world. More than 2/3 of the world's gannets nest in the British Isles, and this colony on St Kilda is the largest on Earth. The isolation of islands like this one provides sanctuary from mainland predators like stoats, weasels and foxes, which would devastate the nests and young of these seabirds. And that's why these birds come here in such numbers. Razorbills, guillemots, kittiwakes, every nook, cranny and ledge seems to be home to somebody. About 1 million puffins come to Britain to breed each summer, bringing colour and character to the cliff tops. Each morning they head off in search of fish, but they attract some unwelcome attention. These islands are not totally free of predators, and while the puffins have big characters, they're rather small birds, easy prey for the much larger black-backed gulls. For this little puffin, it's a lucky escape. Some birds do lose their lives, or their eggs, to airborne predators, but the numbers taken are tiny compared to the damage which would be done by ground predators. The precious isolation provided by our thousands of offshore islands is another vital part of what makes us special. But for the final and perhaps most important piece of the puzzle, I need to look further inland. In one of our most beautiful and majestic landscapes. With over 800 square miles of some of the most unspoilt countryside in Britain, this is Snowdonia National Park. For me, this is Journey's End, but I'm not here just to admire the view. I'm looking for something on a much smaller scale, which can help me explain the most special thing of all about the nature of Britain. And for me, it's the fulfilment of a lifelong ambition.
It's something I've wanted to see for many years, and this is its ideal habitat. That's not exactly my idea of a perfect place to live. These north-facing slopes get no sun at all. There's hardly any soil in these cool, dank crevices, but they're home to lots of specialist plants, things like the rose root with its succulent leaves. The miners used to use this as a cure for toothache. And here we've got the feathery foliage thalictrum, down there, thyme. You see, there appears to be nothing here, but then when you look closely, you find lots of things that are adapted to dwelling here.
Living in these harsh conditions means that plants have to put up with a lot, rarely seeing the sunlight, and enduring winter temperatures which can plummet to -20.
There's one that's tougher than all the rest, and that's what we've come all this way to see. And here it is. The Snowdon lily. This one's just beginning to go over now, but it is so rare. It grows nowhere else in Britain except in Snowdonia, and then only in these little isolated crevices in rock where it's shady and cool. It was discovered in the 17th century by a local man called Edward Llwyd and named after him, Lloydia serotina. It's taken me to my mid-50s to set eyes on it in the wild. Quite a thrill.
The Snowdon lily certainly isn't the most spectacular British plant, though it has a certain simple charm, but it's a great example of a living thing perfectly adapted to very specific conditions.
However harsh this environment is, the Snowdon lily grows here not despite the conditions, but because of them. Some plants and animals are generalists and can thrive almost anywhere, but others, like the Snowdon lily, are specialists and need particular conditions in order to thrive. And that's the final key to understanding what makes Britain so special. Because we have such an incredible number of these different habitats that are home to different combinations of plants and animals, the British Isles are unique.
We might not be the biggest country in the world, but when it comes to diversity of landscapes, we really do take some beating. And all these habitats have their own special blend of wildlife. We've begun to explore some of them in this programme, but there's so much more to reveal. And over the coming weeks, that's exactly what I'll be doing. From the lonely wilderness to the ever-changing coast, through forests, lakes and rivers, to the landscapes we've created ourselves, we'll seek out the most beautiful wildlife, the most spectacular scenery, and the most remarkable stories to discover the unique qualities that make each one so precious. There's simply nowhere else in the world that has quite so much, quite so packed into such a small space. Final proof, if any were truly needed, that the British Isles really are a special place. But we're not just looking for what's special on the grand scale. We're also going to explore the nature of Britain where you live.
I always loved coming back home to Wharfdale and to the river that was at the heart of my world when I was a boy. It's in these waters that I used to find minnows and bullheads and catfish and crayfish. And starting next week, at the end of each programme, we'll be exploring places and discovering wildlife on your home turf, whether it's in the heart of a city, in the depths of a forest, or on the banks of a river, like this one.
We've teams all over Britain travelling the length and breadth of our islands to find plants, animals and conservation activities that you can enjoy in your very own backyard.
So before I get started here in Yorkshire, just have a look at some of the highlights in weeks to come.
In the Peak District, we'll discover how radio tagging birds is bringing back a lost rarity.
This is one of the first wild bred grouse since the 1980s.
Well, good luck. Off you go.
Right across the country, we'll see how clearing unwanted scrub helps all kinds of species. In Scotland, we'll find that stunning wildlife spectacles are never very far away.
It's in the water. Flapping, flapping. It's caught one. It's got a fish.
And in our towns and cities, we'll learn how wildlife can be found in the most unusual places.
So we've come to the supermarket car park, which seems a very bizarre place to be looking for water voles, but I guess
yeah, believe it or not, there's been a colony of water voles here for about 20 years at least.
So as you can see, there's more wildlife under your nose than you might imagine. Back here in Yorkshire, at the Otley Wetland Nature Reserve, my local patch, the Wharfdale Naturalist Society have been putting a huge amount of hard work into creating a wealth of wildlife habitats from a group of abandoned gravel pits. Everyone here has their own job, be it managing grassland for orchids, clearing sites for dragonflies, or monitoring bird species like these great crested grebes.
One of the greatest things at this time of year in spring is the courtship display.
Oh, it's superb, isn't it? They'll pick the weed up and shake it about. Eventually swim towards one another and stand up in the water. It's a superb thing to see.
These Yorkshire folk have created a real jewel here with this new reserve that's already packed with riches. Hopefully this and other stories you'll hear during the series will encourage you, whether you're 8 or 80, to get out and make a difference in your own part of the country.
So, whatever your age or expertise, there'll be something to enjoy.
We got something.
Oh, Rotty, that is lovely. Do you know what that is?
No, I'm not sure.
It's a beetle. This is obviously one that runs around the meadow.
The red squirrel is a threatened species, and these children from Stracker Primary School have decided to do something about it.
I like red squirrels because they have double joints in their feet and they can turn them right the way round.
Down in East Anglia, we'll be helping the experts at work.
We really need to know where the dragonflies are, because if we don't know where they are, we can't conserve them.
This one's stunning. What is it?
It's a brown hawker. You can tell that by the brown colour of the body and the wings, the brown wings.
And in the northwest, we'll join families as they take a closer look at their local river.
Now, the best thing to do is to gently roll the rock back. Can you see him? See if I can catch him. This is what they call a white-clawed crayfish, and he's very rare these days.
So come on, get involved, like I am. Here we're patting this little bit of wood in Otley. Now this is, it says on this packet, Pat, mixed canary.
Yeah.
We don't get canaries in this wood. What eats this?
The finches, goldfinch, greenfinch,
Chaffinch.
bullfinch, chaffinch.
It's not just bird feeders you seem to be putting up, Pat. I keep spotting footballs and rugby balls in the undergrowth.
I saw an article about a football fanatic who cut a hole in a football and had a robin nesting in it.
If I were a robin, I wouldn't mind that as a home.
No, there's rest.
It's this imaginative approach to conservation that's made a success of this reserve, and whatever your skills, there's likely to be a conservation organisation looking for your help.
Once a gardener, always a gardener. On the rather wild scale.
And once all the hard work's been done, you'll get the chance to have a nice cup of tea and catch up with friends.
Well, I've had a great time. I've learnt a lot, laughed quite a lot, enjoyed great hospitality, and discovered how people with passion can make a real difference to the nature of Britain.
And don't forget, in the coming weeks, you'll learn how you too can make a difference in your own local area.
If you'd like to do your bit to help by joining our Breathing Places campaign, or if you'd like to see for yourself some of the wildlife we've featured in the programme, you can go to our website, bbc.co.uk/Nature of Britain. You can also get a free BBC Open University calendar featuring seasonal activities and events all over the country. Just call 0870 942 1343, or you can get it from your local library.
Next time on The Nature of Britain, exotic prize fighters and sheep beside the seaside. We discover beauty in unexpected places and uncover intricate relationships. We fly with the fastest animal on the planet and witness incredible spectacles.
And still they're coming, they're still flocking in.
All in the nature of farmland Britain.
And that's next Wednesday at 10:40 here on BBC One. Explore our passion for wildlife and its conservation in half an hour. Chris Packham presents A Nature of Britain, a user's guide on BBC 4 at 10:30.